All right, so imagine this, right? You're grabbing your morning coffee, using your debit card, simple $3. And then later that day, boom, a $35 overdraft fee just slams into your account, all because your rent went through earlier than you thought it would.
Oof. Yeah, I can definitely see how that would be super frustrating.
Totally. And, the crazy part is this isn't just like a made-up scenario. This is something that could actually happen, and thanks to some recent happenings in Washington, it might be even more likely now.
Exactly right. And that's what we're going to be unpacking today. So Congress recently made a decision to overturn a rule from the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Right, the CFPB.
And this rule basically was meant to put a stop to these kinds of crazy high overdraft fees that banks could just, spring on people.
Okay, so that's what we're diving into today. We're going to be looking at an article by Steve Rhode. He's known as the Get Out of Debt guy, and his website is getoutofdebt.org. Really great resource, by the way, for anyone who's, dealing with debt and wants some smart strategies and just some help without feeling ashamed.
A great resource for sure.
Yeah, and in his article, Steve talks about how this decision by Congress basically is letting big banks off the hook. They can keep charging these crazy high fees, almost like what you see with payday loans. He even calls them payday loan style rates, which, I mean, it's a pretty accurate comparison,
It
right?
is a pretty striking comparison.
Yeah, and he makes this really interesting point about how these financial protections, the ones that are being rolled back, they're just as important for our well-being as other kinds of protections like public safety regulations. It makes you think.
Definitely.
So yeah, we'll put a link to Steve's full article in the show notes if you want, read the whole thing.
Always good to go to the source.
For sure. But basically what we're going to do in this deep dive is we're going to cut through all the noise, all the political stuff, and try to figure out, okay, what exactly was this rule that got overturned? Who's going to be affected the most by it? And this is the big one. What can you actually do about it? What can you do to protect yourself?
Absolutely. We need to make this practical for everyone.
Totally. Okay, so first things first. What exactly was this CFPB rule all about? What was it trying to do?
Okay, so this rule was finalized back in December of 2024, and it's really focused on the big banks, the ones with more than $10 billion in assets. The really big players in the financial world.
Right, the ones with a lot of power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what this rule did was it gave these banks a choice. They could either cap their overdraft fees at $5, $5 every time someone overdrafts.
Okay, so a hard limit.
Yeah, a hard limit. Or if they wanted to charge more than that, they'd have to actually prove that the higher fee was justified. They had to show that it actually cost them that much to process the overdraft.
Oh, interesting. So they had to show their work, basically.
Exactly. So the whole idea was to stop banks from just, making a ton of money off of people who are just a little bit short in their accounts.
Right, so not just using it as a sneaky way to make extra profit.
Exactly. It was all about fairness and transparency.
I see. Okay, so a $5 cap or show us the receipts seems pretty reasonable to me. But clearly Congress didn't agree, right?
Yeah.
So how did they actually go about undoing this rule?
Well, they use something called the Congressional Review Act, the CRA. It's
Yeah.
basically like an undo button for regulations that have been put in place recently.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so with the CRA, Congress can look at these new federal rules, and if both the House and the Senate, if they vote to disapprove of a rule, and it's just a simple majority, then it gets repealed. And that's exactly what happened here. So back on March 27th of this year, the Senate voted to repeal this CFPB rule, 52 to 48.
Wow, 52 to 48, that's close.
It was a really close vote, yeah. And the House had already voted in favor of repeal, too. So that means the rule is, it's gone. It's off the books now.
Okay, so a close vote, but a big impact. So let's talk about the winners and losers here. I mean, it seems pretty obvious, but let's break it down.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The biggest winners here are, no surprise, the mega banks, the huge financial institutions. This repeal means they can go right back to charging those high overdraft fees, and they don't have to justify them. No $5 cap, nothing. And, what's really concerning is that this actually encourages banks to, rely on these fees as a way to make money. It's almost like it incentivizes them to do things that lead to more overdrafts, like maybe changing the order they process transactions in.
So potentially making the problem worse on purpose.
Potentially, yeah. It's not a good look. And on the other side, you have the people who are going to be hurt by this, and that's, the average consumer, especially people who are living paycheck to paycheck, who might not have a lot of extra money in their accounts. They're the ones who are most likely to accidentally overdraft and now they're going to be hit with these huge fees.
Yeah, makes sense. And it seems like some pretty high-profile people are upset about this too. We have a quote here from California Attorney General Rob Bonta, and he's clearly not happy about this decision.
Oh, yeah, he definitely didn't mince words. He said, and I quote, "Congress just voted to increase bank fees. This directly harms consumers already struggling with affordability and the ripples of inflation. Let me be clear. By allowing big banks to charge high overdraft fees, Congress is paving the way for wealthy banks to get wealthier and for working class people to be squeezed even further."
Wow, yeah, he really lays it out there, doesn't he?
He does. It's a pretty stark reminder of what's at stake here.
Totally. And it's not just like a
Mm.
few dollars here and there. We're talking about a lot of money,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah, a huge amount of money. The article mentions that just in 2022, financial institutions raked in over $7.7 billion in overdraft and non-sufficient funds fees. And to put that into perspective, people in California alone paid $200 million of that.
That is a wild number.
It is. And you know what's really disturbing? These fees, they disproportionately affect people with lower incomes and communities of color. So it's like it's making existing inequalities even worse.
Yeah, it's like a double whammy.
Exactly. It's a real problem.
So Steve Rhode, in his article, he makes this really interesting comparison between these overdraft fees and like the whole world of payday lending. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what's the connection there?
So what's fascinating is that the business models are actually quite similar. Rode argues that these high overdraft fees, especially when you factor in something called fee stacking, they become predatory. He even uses terms like legalized predation and corporate mugging.
Okay, fee stacking. Haven't heard that term before. What is that?
So fee stacking is when a bank hits you with multiple overdraft fees in one day, even if the total amount you're overdrawn by is really small, like a few bucks, and even if the transactions happen close together, it's like they're just piling on the fees.
Oh, wow, that's messed up.
It really is. And so the comparison to payday loans comes in because, like payday loans, these overdraft fees often don't reflect how much it actually costs the bank to provide the service. They just keep adding up, and there's often very little warning before you get slammed with them. It's basically taking advantage of people who are in a tough spot financially.
Yeah, using people's vulnerability to make a profit.
Exactly.
Not cool. Okay, so we've talked about the banks, we've talked about consumers. Now let's talk about the politicians. Who in Congress was really pushing for this repeal to happen?
Well, according to the article, the main person behind this effort was Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina. His argument was that basically the CFPB rule would limit people's choices when it comes to banking. Like it would
Yeah.
take away options.
Hmm. Okay, consumer choice. Let's unpack that for a second. When someone gets hit with like a $35 fee because they overdrafted by a dollar or two, is that really a choice?
That's the question, right? Like if you have an automatic payment that you forgot about and it triggers an overdraft,
Mm.
or if there's a delay with a deposit, are you really choosing to pay that $35 fee? Rode makes the point that in a lot of cases, it's not a real choice. It's just a consequence of how complicated our financial system is and the fact that a lot of people are living really close to the edge financially.
Right. It's not like you're sitting there thinking, oh, I'd love to pay this huge fee.
Exactly. So the idea that you're choosing to incur this fee, it doesn't really hold up when you look at the reality of the situation, especially when the alternative is just having the transaction declined. For a lot of people, that would be a way better outcome.
Yeah, just nope, not enough money. Transaction denied. Done.
Exactly. Less stressful, less costly in the long run.
Okay, so it seems like Congress isn't really going to do much to protect people from these fees. So what can our listeners do? What are some practical steps they can take to avoid getting hit with these crazy charges?
So good news is there are things you can do. The article lays out a few really practical tips. First one, and this might seem obvious, but opt out of overdraft protection. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but if you don't have overdraft protection, then your transactions will just get declined if you don't have enough money. And yeah, that can be inconvenient, but it's a lot better than getting slammed with a $35 fee.
Right, better to be safe than sorry.
Exactly. Another thing you can do is think about using credit cards instead of debit cards for certain purchases. Obviously, this depends on your individual situation and how you manage your credit, but credit cards generally have better legal protections if there's a fraudulent charge or a dispute.
Okay, so credit cards can offer more security.
Exactly. Now, this doesn't mean go crazy with credit cards, but it can be a helpful tool in some cases.
Right, always use credit responsibly. What else can people do?
Well, the article also talks about how important it is to be really careful about tracking your account balance. You need to know where you stand financially. There are some cool tools out there that can help you with this, like Credit Karma, which was mentioned in the article. These tools can give you a really clear picture of your spending and help you catch potential overdraft situations before they happen.
Oh yeah, those budgeting apps can be really helpful.
They really can. And another thing, and this is important, be wary of debt relief ads. When people are struggling financially, they can be more susceptible to scams and predatory practices.
Right, people trying to take advantage of the situation.
Exactly. So the advice is to be really cautious about any unsolicited offers or anything that sounds too good to be true. And if you're looking for financial advice, stick to fee-only professionals. These are people who are legally and ethically bound to put your interests first, unlike someone who might be getting a commission for selling you a product.
Right, so make sure you're getting advice from someone you can trust.
Absolutely. And this might surprise some people, but the article even mentions bankruptcy as a potential option.
Whoa, really? Bankruptcy?
Yeah, I know it's not something people like to think about, but the article points out that bankruptcy can actually be a good solution for some people who are facing overwhelming debt. And often it leads to a more stable financial situation in the long run. It's not the first step, of course, but it's something to consider if you're really struggling.
So not something to be afraid of necessarily.
Right, it can be a way to get a fresh start.
Interesting. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Let's do a quick recap. What are the main takeaways for our listeners?
So here's the big picture.
Yeah.
The CFPB tried to limit these crazy overdraft fees. Congress stepped in and overturned that protection. And now the big banks can go back to charging those high fees. And the result is that consumers are probably going to lose billions of dollars, money that's going to go straight to the banks.
Yeah, not a great outcome.
Not at all.
Okay, so the article has a little FAQ section at the end, which is really helpful. Let's run through those questions real quick. First one, just to confirm, was there actually a rule in place to cap overdraft fees at $5?
Yes, there was. The CFPB finalized that rule back in December of 2024. And the article mentions that it was projected to save consumers a significant amount of money.
Okay, so it was real, it was happening, and
And then Congress repealed it. The Senate vote was on March 27th, 2025, 52 to 48. And that was it. The rule was gone.
and why did they do it? What was the reasoning?
Well, the article presents both sides. Supporters of the repeal said that the rule would make banking services less available and potentially more expensive. But those who opposed the repeal said it was just a way for banks to keep exploiting people, especially those with low incomes.
Right, so two very different perspectives.
Very different.
Okay, last question from the FAQ. What can people do to avoid these fees?
The article gives the same advice we talked about earlier. Turn off overdraft protection if you can. Try to keep a little emergency fund. Even just $50 can make a difference. And if you need financial advice, find a fee-only professional.
Solid advice. All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into overdraft fees, it really makes you think about like the bigger picture, right? Does our financial system actually care about the well-being of individuals, or is it all about making sure the big institutions make as much money as possible?
Yeah, it's the question worth pondering. It really highlights the power dynamics at play here.
For sure. And, we'd love to hear from our listeners. If you've been affected by these overdraft fees, tell us about it. Sharing your stories helps everyone understand what's really going on.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for more info on this topic or just want to learn more about managing debt and personal finance, definitely check out Steve Rhode's article on getoutofdebt.org. It's a great resource.
Yes, we'll put the link in the show notes. And to leave you with one final thought, what other financial regulations are out there that might be having a big impact on your life, even if you don't realize it? It's a good reminder to stay informed and to think critically about these things.
Couldn't agree more. It's all about awareness and empowerment.
Absolutely.